Kalayachi, Minister of Finance, Economic Planning and Development, Mr. Imraj Ramial, Chairman of the Economic Development Board, Mr. Issa Soumali, Vice Chairman of the Economic Development Board, Mr. Vish Sundram, the Deputy Financial Secretary, the Ministry of Finance, Economic Planning and Development, Deputy Financial Secretaries, Captains of Industry, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you and welcome to the Public-Private Joint Committee chaired by the Honourable Minister of Finance, Economic Planning and Development. This committee, I am pleased to note, has become a much awaited event in the local economic calendar, and the continuous presence of the private sector shows that it remains as relevant as ever. This platform is of extreme importance given the pace at which global economic conditions keep changing. Not later than last week, the Director General of the World Trade Organization, Mrs. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, explained that the war between Russia and Ukraine, which resulted in food and energy crisis and spiraling inflation, will lead to lower growth in global trade, going further by forecasting a strong possibility of a global recession. The economic situation is reflected in the high levels of volatility in stock and commodity markets, demonstrating rising uncertainties which will have a definite impact on investment and growth. The Mauritian economy has so far managed to maintain an upward trajectory with the timely and effective measures put in place by government during the pandemic, managing to support jobs and businesses and putting us on a firm recovery path. Exports of goods and services, FDI, and tourist arrival are on the rise. However, we need to remain cautious and double our efforts to ensure that the effects of the global downturn, which is principally affecting our main markets, do not affect the momentum. This makes this meeting here today even more important. By working together, we can discuss on the challenges that the current economic environment presents and together find appropriate policy responses. We will see during this session a synthesis of the 2 years of the pandemic and the formidable response by our citizens, businesses, and the government to make sure that the pandemic does not hinder our long-term growth prospects. We will also see a presentation on how we manage to bounce back stronger. Without further ado, as usual in our joint public-private committees, I have the pleasure to hand over the mic to Eric Ning, who is our consultant and moderator for this session today. So over to you.
Merci, Ken. Vous m'entendez tous? Bonjour tout le monde. Bonjour, Monsieur le ministre des Finances et du économique, M. Kalayachi. Tous les protocoles observés. Et aujourd'hui, nous avons un programme assez chargé. Je vois que nous même ceux qui sont présents, quand même, ils vont les relever aujourd'hui. Ils ont pas mal d'interventions. Contrairement aux 4 précédentes sessions, nous n'allons pas passer directement aux interventions du secteur privé. Nous allons d'abord commencer par une petite vidéo montrant les interventions, les réponses du gouvernement à la pandémie du Covid. Et puis, nous allons passer au Deputy Financial Secretary, Dr. Soumram, pour une intervention sur les réponses du gouvernement un an après l'ouverture des fonds. D'abord, un petit vidéo clip. Merci.
Aujourd'hui, le Conseil des ministres fin décidé qu'il pourrait y avoir un confinement national à partir de 6 h grand matin demain, qui peut durer pendant 2 semaines. Ça veut dire qu'il ne faut pas faire le travail, excepté les services essentiels. Pour défendre reste toute la case et évite de sortir pas nécessaire. L'activité économique pour réduire au minimum pour que tout le monde ne pas déplacé. Toute chose pour fermer. 1000 les salaires de base travailleurs jusqu'à 5 000.
Le voir dans la vidéo, il y a un an, exactement un an, le 1er octobre 2021, il y a eu l'ouverture totale des frontières. Eh bien, un an après, où on est, qu'est-ce que le gouvernement a fait? Quelle était la réaction, les interventions du gouvernement et des autorités après l'ouverture totale des frontières? Eh bien, j'invite M. Stogram, député Financial Secretary, de nous en dire plus.
The Honorable Hanganaden Padayachi, Minister of Finance, Economic Planning and Development, Mr. M. Raj Hanyal, Chairman of the EDB, Mr. Issa Somani, Vice Chairman of the EDB, Mr. Ken Punusami, CEO of the EDB, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning to you all. The video that we've just seen has shown us how we've managed two of the most difficult years of our history. Indeed, managing the impact of COVID-19 pandemic has been a daunting experience for our citizens, for our businesses, and for the government. Nearly 3 years since COVID appeared, it becomes easy to forget that at some point in time, there were no tourists on our shores, families were confined in their homes with limited access to food and basic necessities. Our shops and offices were closed, our factories were no longer operational. Most importantly, the lives of our citizens were in a particularly difficult situation. The scale of the response, however, has been proportionate to the magnitude of the challenge that lay before us. The wage assistance scheme, however, has been and the other support scheme put in place by the government and institutions have been able to help us through this storm. Today, 1 year after the reopening of the borders, which in itself marked a landmark occasion in our quest to rise back stronger and leave COVID in the past, it is opportune to reflect on the progress that we've made, a progress which bears the mark of all these measures that we've announced in previous budget speeches, and also of the courage and solidarity that our citizens displayed. As you are aware, the outbreak of COVID-19 resulted in a contraction of the Mauritian GDP by 14.6% in 2020, which is equivalent to around 448 billion Mauritian rupees. We started to recover in 2021 with a growth rate of 3.6, that is a GDP of 480 billion. Excluding 2020, the average growth rate for the last decade was around 3.8%. Not later than last Friday, while other countries are speaking about a possible recession, Statistics Mauritius revised its estimate for GDP growth to 8.5%, up from an initial forecast of 7.9%. This is due to a strong bounce back in the tourism sector, as well as resolute recovery in manufacturing, free port, and financial services sectors, amongst others. On the investment side, both public and private investments started to recover after the pandemic. In 2021, private investment was 74 billion rupees compared to 58.5 billion in 2020. Private investment is expected to reach 80.1 billion in 2022, which is above the pre-pandemic years. While total investment fell in 2020, it is important to highlight that we recovered most of the fall in 2021, and now total investment in 2021 is expected to be better than pre-COVID periods. As regards foreign direct investment, it will exceed 20 billion this year as major projects in the real estate, manufacturing, financial services, and ICT sectors materialize. Mauritius remains a trusted jurisdiction for investments. Coming to export of goods would grow by 15.1%, higher than the 6.4% growth in 2021, while exports of services would further increase by 38.8% after an expansion of 14.9% in 2021. Exports is expected to reach 100 billion in 2022. This reflects a strong performance in domestic exports, re-exports, and bunkering activities. I'd like to point out that several schemes were put in place by the Ministry of Finance to help companies boost their exports. These schemes covers freight rebate, trade and promotion, export credit guarantee. The schemes have helped sustain export-oriented enterprises during the pandemic and will continue to do so in the future as our operators maximize on the potential benefits that new trade agreements such as SECPA with India, FTA with China, and the African Continental Free Trade Area confer. Moving to the tourism sector, which is one of the most affected sectors with the two lockdowns. As of August 2022, 557,000 tourists visited Mauritius, 3 times more tourists compared to last year, and 80% more than in 2020. As per Statistics Mauritius, tourist receipt amounted to 25 billion rupees for the period January-June 2022, 66% higher than 2021 and 43% more than in 2020. The target of 1 million tourists is not far and remains within our reach. COVID-19 has had a negative impact on the economy, leading to closure of businesses and loss of jobs. In 2020, the Mauritian economy recorded an unemployment rate of 9.2%, with a slight decrease to 9.1% in 2021. However, it should be highlighted that at the beginning of COVID-19 outbreak, it was estimated that the pandemic will cost jobs of more than 77,000 people in Mauritius. With the supportive measures of government, the rise in unemployment was mitigated to 12,500. As the economy recovers in 2022, unemployment is expected to fall to 7.8%, following the new measures announced in Budget Speech 2022-23. To face off the crisis caused by COVID-19 pandemic and preserve jobs and livelihoods, government has had to resort to exceptional measures and deploy unprecedented levels of resources. Government debt stood at 396 billion as at June 2022, representing 76.1% of our GDP. Public sector debt stood at 449 billion as at June 2022, representing 86.5% of our GDP. Government has a target to reduce the public sector debt to 78% as at end June 2023. It would further drop to 75.4% as at end June 2024, and a further reduction to 71.8% by end June 2025. We are confident that this will be achieved. All the positive signs are also reflected in the economic sentiment indicator of the EDB, which is based on a quarterly survey conducted with private sector operators. In the second quarter of 2022, the ESI stood at 116.1 points, above the 100 points, which demonstrate a positive sentiment. The ESI increased by 22% compared to the same period last year. Compared to quarter one of 2022, an increase of 15% has been noted. The ESI, should be noted, is positive for all the primary, secondary, and tertiary sectors of the economy. The future is positive as well. While the measures during the pandemic allowed us some respite and enable a strong recovery, we are conscious that we need to redynamize our economy and further diversify our sectors and markets. The government strategy is threefold. First, to consolidate existing sectors such as manufacturing, agro-industry, ICT, and financial services. Second, to accelerate the growth of emerging sectors and segments. And third, to develop new pillars of our economy. We have put all means in place for our ambitions to materialize. This has been crafted through constant dialogue with private stakeholders, and its realization will also require the collaboration of both government and the private sector. This forum today is an example of how such dialogues can make things happen, and I'm confident that when unfettered dialogue prevails above everything, we can achieve much more. Thank you.